I'm a Team Edward bitch. Like, what do you want from me? Hey nerds, it's Michaela back again with another video, and it is time for my first monthly wrap-up of 2021. So January has gone, reading-wise, a lot better than the end of 2020 did. I was able to read quite a lot. I read in total 17 books, and I am really proud of myself for that, particularly because a lot of those are read really early on. I work for a university, which means that the start of a term, which January is the start of the spring term, I am usually extremely busy. So I managed to get 17 books read, even though I basically haven't stopped moving or even stopped long enough to take a breath in several weeks now. I also really love that for the first time in an extremely long time, I went to my local library. In reality, I went on their website and I put a bunch of books on reserve and then went and picked them up. But I read a bunch of library books. I literally went to like grad school for library shit, and I don't ever use the library, so a lot of the books that I read came from my local library. Now, if you did not watch my end of year wrap-up chat thing video, which is totally fine if you didn't, I am doing my monthly wrap-ups differently this year than I did them in 2020. I have one of the worst memories like in the world. I treat books like I also treat movies, which is as I am reading it, I am having an experience and I'm having a good time, I'm having a bad time, I'm having a neutral time, I'm having a time. I'm reading the book and I'm having a time. But I don't like commit myself to this book. It's pretty rare that like I can like read a book and like it just like absolutely hold on to me forever, and it's like it consumes me and consumes my life afterwards, right? Like a movie, I watch a movie and I'm like, oh, like that was fun. I had fun doing that. And then I like move on with my life, and like a couple of days later, I probably can't tell you like the majority of what happened in that movie. That's what I am with books. I read a book and I have whatever time that I have, and then I move on. That is a problem when you task yourself with, at the end of every month, talking in some detail about the books that you read. If I finish a book in the first week of January, and then, at the end of January or the beginning of February, I have to talk about that book, that's an issue because I don't remember. So my solution has been every time I finish a book, I just record a quick couple of minutes just talking about the book, what I thought about it, what I liked, what I didn't like. And that has been a fantastic experience because you were getting my pretty immediate reactions. Like I said, I've been very busy, so sometimes I've had to record a couple days later, but relatively soon after, my impressions, what I thought about it. And it's also been really great for me because I've been able to work on editing this video that you're watching throughout the entire month. It's not that I'm going to sit down and about to have like an hour's worth of footage to edit. I just have like little snippets that I get to edit at a time, and that has been so wonderful. I can't even describe to you how much that has taken off of me. I am not afraid of editing this anymore because I only have to do like a couple minutes at a time. It's wonderful. So that's what you're about to see. You are about to see several clips of me throughout my month. So my hair is going to look very different for almost all of these clips. And you're just gonna hear me talking about what I've read, what I think about it, and then I will pop back in at the end for the outro. Almost said extro. All right, welcome to 2021. It is late-ish, not that late, on January 1st, and I have just finished my first book of the year. I have decided to kick off 2021 with a little bit of comfort food. I don't know if you are aware, but 2020 sucked. So I'm starting 2021 on like a totally different note. I'm not trying to be anything or impress anyone. We're starting with the garbage, because I figure if you start with the garbage, you can only work up from there. So the first book I have just finished is of course Twilight by Stephenie Meyer. I am planning to read the entire Twilight saga to kick off this year. What is there to really say about this? Obviously it is a reread. I had a intense Twilight phase when I was in middle school. I believe I read this for the first time in 2008, 2007, 2008, I can't exactly remember. And this was my entire life for like the 7th and 8th grade. Like this was it. This is all that was going on. This is all that my life was about. I have a lot of thoughts and opinions about this series. I don't know if I'm going to necessarily share them in the reviews that I will be doing. I may actually make like an entirely dedicated Twilight saga video in the future. I don't know. If you're interested, let me know. But for now, like, what can I just say about Twilight? Like, it is the first book in this series. Reading it now, at 25. I think I last read this shortly after I graduated college, so maybe like 22-ish. I was surprised then how much I liked rereading the series, and rereading this now, I was actually sort of surprised by how much of the writing I liked, particularly like in the first half. In the second half, things got a little shakier, but in the first half of this book, like Stephenie Meyer's writing is actually pretty solid. It's not perfect. There are definitely like edits I would have made, but she has like lots of descriptions and turns of phrase, and I'm like, those are pretty solid. Like those are really well done. And I forgot how funny Bella is. Like, it makes me mad because I know in the future books, like Stephenie Meyer like really just like drops Bella's personality. Like, I don't necessarily always like her personality in this. I don't like what a weak little lamb she is. Like, that's fucking annoying. But she is funny in this. Like, she has some like solid zingers that made me laugh out loud. Edward was funny in this. I don't remember Edward being funny. Like, that is not, if you asked me to describe Edward, that was not gonna be one of the words I picked, but he was funny in this. I feel like the books just get like less funny and have less personality as they go. So in that regard, I think this is actually a pretty strong start. I was surprised to find out that this is 500 pages. I don't remember Twilight being this long. I feel like if, you know, prior to reading this, you asked me to describe the plot of Twilight, I could do it in just a couple of sentences. It's not like that complicated, but there's like a lot of buildup to this, and I don't necessarily think that's like a bad thing. I think a lot of the buildup is necessary. It got a little bit draggy, but I'm a Team Edward bitch. Like, what do you want from me? I'm not gonna complain. But I mean, I read this entire thing in a day. I started this at like 2 in the afternoon and I finished it 6 hours later. I just like took a break for dinner and other things, so I wasn't reading straight through. But I just read this, and I'm glad I did. I'm glad I started 2021 with this, because it was a great little blast from the past. It was something I didn't really have to think a lot about. I am excited to continue reading these. I highly recommend that if you have a garbage, soap, terrible drama, romance, whatever series that's like a comfort thing for you, revisit that now. Like, that was a great time. Like, set the expectations for 2021. In 2021, we're focusing on ourselves. We're taking care of ourselves, and we're not trying to be pretentious. We're not trying to prove anything. We're reading the shit that brings us joy, or whatever Twilight brings us. Is it joy? Probably not. But yeah, I gave this 3 stars. In some ways it was better than I remembered, in some ways it wasn't, but I still had a fun time reading it, and I am excited for New Moon. Hey there, it is now a chilly Sunday afternoon, and I have just finished New Moon. So it took me just a couple days to read because I spend Saturdays with my parents, so I basically didn't read anything on Saturday, or very, very little bit. But yeah, I just finished. I always forget how good New Moon is, because when I first read the series 10 million times in a row when I was in middle school, I was so Team Edward that I thought there was no point in rereading New Moon whenever I read the series. I very often would go Twilight, Eclipse, Breaking Dawn. I would just skip New Moon entirely because I'm like, it's just Jacob. Like, what? I don't give a fuck about Jacob. And Jacob is a very flawed character, but in this book, he is actually like a delight. I really love Jacob in New Moon. Jacob in Eclipse is a different story. But yeah, this book is so good, and I forget it. Like, is Stephenie Meyer's writing very good? No. But this is super enjoyable. It's just fun. Like, I forget how much fun reading Twilight is. You know, it's fun to get frustrated, and it's fun to like judge these characters for making terrible decisions. You know, I do get annoyed with the trope of, you know, person A leaving person B because they see themselves as a threat and all this bullshit. And, you know, Bella is incredibly infantilized throughout almost the entirety of this novel, and it's frustrating. I don't like the way really any of the men in her life talk to her or about her, but I mean, what do we expect from Stephenie Meyer, am I right? This is such a good decision. I'm so glad I started out the year with these books because I feel so light. I feel very free reading these. I think I did not and have not given nostalgia and this sort of like return to older things and comfort things. I have not valued that over the past couple of years, and yeah, reading this, I mean, it made me feel like giddy and silly and young again, and I really liked that. I still sort of maintain a larger position, which I've had for several years, which is that I do not think anybody really under the age of like 15, 16 should be reading these books. I know that I learned a lot of lessons from reading Twilight when I was a kid that took me many years to unpack, but now I feel like I can read these as a 25-year-old and be like, oh, this is just like, I can just have fun with this. I can just take the good parts and like ignore the bad parts, because I know I'm not like actually internalizing the bad parts. I've already done the work, and I know that like all of the like deeply rooted misogyny and racism and all sorts of things in these books, because these books are very problematic, I can ignore them because I already internalize them and then process them out of myself, right? I can do that work. You can't do that work when you're 12, which is how old I was when I first read these. But yeah, I really love Jacob and Bella's friendship. Bella's intense guilt complex aside, I actually think that she does a pretty good job in this book of setting boundaries with Jacob. Could it be better? Yes. But it's not bad. Like, I think she actually does a pretty good job of like making sure it's clear like what her intentions are and what her feelings are. And, you know, he kind of does the same thing. Like, he makes it pretty clear that he has feelings for her, but that like he will accept what she gives him. I don't think that's necessarily very healthy to like continue to be such close and intimate friends with someone you very clearly want to date. I don't know. I'm not gonna like really pass judgment on that. I know that relationships are complicated, but in terms of like the way that they communicate with each other, it could be a lot worse. Like, they do a fairly good job for two fucking teenagers. So you probably noticed I'm not doing a plot summary for this book, and I didn't do a plot summary for Twilight, and I probably will not be doing a plot summary for the next two books, simply because this is the Twilight Saga and it is now 2021. If you do not know the plot of the Twilight Saga by now, either you're gonna read the books or you won't. I'm not going to get into it. I think these books are like pretty well established as what they are. So it's the Twilight Saga. It's like the defining YA romance series of a generation, probably ever. Has there ever been an explicitly romance series for YA that has been as big as Twilight? Like, I really don't think so. I feel like Twilight gets compared to Harry Potter a lot because the same generation that grew up with Harry Potter also grew up with Twilight, and they're both fantasy, and they were both absolute massive smash global hits. But there really isn't a lot of overlap between Harry Potter and Twilight. I mean, it's really just the fact that like vampires and werewolves exist in both, but like in very different ways, and like are like werewolves and vampires are far more important in Twilight than they are in Harry Potter. So I wonder, I would really rather compare Twilight to another romance series, but I don't read a ton of romance, so I don't actually know. I mean, the only like recent romances that I can think of where like romance is the sort of end all be all, like there's not really much else going on. There is plot, and the plot in Twilight is actually pretty good, but like romance is the name of the game. All I can think was like to all the boys I've loved before. Like, I don't really know. I don't know what the YA kids are reading these days, or what they read even when I was younger, because I just didn't really spend a lot of time reading YA romance. Like, I have Twilight, which I read many, many times. I gave this 4 stars. I do like this better than Twilight. I would not say that I love New Moon. I mean, I love New Moon, and I love the Twilight Saga in general, in that like it's always going to occupy this very specific place in my life. But like, I acknowledge that these books are not fantastic. Like, they're not great. They're good, and they are good to differing degrees, and they're good in different ways. They are good books, but they are not great. They are not 5-star books. So even though, you know, I might have a particular fondness for one or all of them, this is a 4-star book at best, and so that's what I gave it. Next book down, I finished Eclipse actually last night, but I finished it pretty late, so I didn't get a chance to record it today, and that's actually almost nighttime here. Like, I have about 10 minutes before the sun sets, so I want to hurry this up. I forget how good Eclipse is. I'm currently actually like reading Breaking Dawn now. I started it today, so I can't say that it is my favorite yet, but it might be my favorite. And the thing that really brings Eclipse home for me is Edward's character progression. He shows a level of like personal growth and personal change that like basically no one else in the series demonstrates. You know, like, he's the only one who makes like actual personal change and like actual sacrifice and does like introspective work. Like, you know, the two teams are Team Edward and Team Jacob, right? And like I fully understand people who after reading New Moon were like very much Team Jacob. Like I get that, but I don't know how you get to the end of Eclipse after Jacob has sexually assaulted and gaslit and manipulated and abused Bella so explicitly and proudly from like beginning to end in this book. I don't really understand how you can still like him, like as literally like as a person. Like I just don't get it. You know, Edward in like the first third of this book does do a lot of like really shitty things. He is extremely controlling and extremely manipulative. I mean, both Edward and Jacob suck. Like there's really no way around that. But he is able, and like listen, he's an adult. He's fucking 100 years old and Jacob is like 16 or whatever. He is able to take stock of his actions and like their effects, particularly their effects on Bella, and like make adjustments, and to understand that like he is not being protective, he's being jealous. He even like is able to fully admit that, you know, he at the beginning claims that the only reason he doesn't want Bella going to La Push is because of her safety, and then like she calls him out on it, and then later he's like, yeah, like you're right, like I was wrong, I was jealous, and that was really it. And it's just like so refreshing. Like it's actually pretty rare in YA in general for like male characters, particularly male romantic leads, to like admit their faults and like make conscious and explicit strides towards fixing them. I'm not saying like I love Edward, like he is still kind of annoying and he still makes like some bad decisions. It's weird, like his willingness and enthusiasm for compromise, you know, in order to make himself happy and to make Bella happy, I think is good on paper. I think a lot of the things that they're bargaining for aren't great. I don't feel like you should have to bargain for marriage. Like that's just me. I think marriage should be a thing two people go into pretty willingly and enthusiastically. So I mean there's that. Like I'm not saying this is by any means a perfect and non-toxic relationship. I just am consistently kind of like impressed with Edward in this, particularly because like Bella is particularly annoying in this book. This might be the most annoying she's been yet. I found her way less annoying in New Moon when she was like catatonic for a good chunk of the book, and she was still less annoying than she was in this book. And of course Jacob isn't annoying, he's abusive to the point of like, why aren't you behind bars? But there's also the fact that this book has probably the best climax. No, this book definitely has the best climax of the entire series. So like books 1 and 3 are the only books that end with like actual physical confrontation, whereas books 2 and book 4 threaten it, but then ultimately it doesn't happen. And that's something you can do once. You can't do that twice. Like I don't mind it in book 2, right? I actually like the tension at the end of New Moon, where like you don't know what's going to happen and then like things work out fine, but it still doesn't feel fine. It still doesn't like feel great. But at the end of book 4 though, like it is a very much disappointment that like these two sides like amass these essentially armies to face against each other, and nothing happens. That's boring. Like that's fucking boring. Like I will flat out say that. I mean, this is not my review of Breaking Dawn. That will come in a day or so. But you cannot 2 times threaten violence and then 2 times back down when your series only has 4 books. That's not fair. But Eclipse kind of does the opposite. It almost promises no violence and then violence comes, right? Like you think that Bella and Edward are going to be the ones away from the action, and that, oh my god, are we gonna really have to like hear Edward narrate the action like it's a fucking baseball game? But then the action like springs up on them. I think it's very good. I think the surprise of the Volturi, like after the big conflict with Victoria and the newborns happens, and then it's like the Volturi are like, surprise bitch, it's me, you know. I think that's really great. Yeah, I think Eclipse is probably, is it the best paced? I mean it got a little long, I'm actually not gonna lie. It did get a little long. It took everybody like way too fucking long to figure out what was happening. Bella continues, I don't know if I meant this, but Bella's like a really bad friend. She's bad to all of her human friends. I don't know why any of them talk to her, but she's like really bad in this one. Like this is definitely the worst she's ever been. I will say that the harshness that they showed to her in book 2 after, you know, a very devastating breakup wasn't necessarily called for. However, she definitely gives it back to them in this one by being just like the worst. So, and there's like one other thing that like I don't want to compliment Stephenie Meyer, right? Meyer? It's Meyer, Stephenie Meyer. I know this. I was a twihard. I fucking know this. I don't want to compliment her because she's like racist and conservative and misogynistic and terrible, right? I don't want to do that. But I have to admit, her ability to like set things up and pay it off like hundreds and hundreds of pages later is like really good. You know, just the way that, you know, she in this book dedicates just this one chapter to, you know, Rosalie telling Bella her backstory and not even really focusing too much on how much Rosalie wanted to be a mother, and how much Rosalie loves children, right? It was definitely part of her story, but it wasn't the focus. The focus was like on her trauma, and just that one chapter, that one conversation, like setting up so beautifully like everything that happens in Breaking Dawn. There's like tons of moments like that, you know, little thing, you know, the way that from book one, just like these sort of smaller details that sort of indicate that Bella was really always meant to be a vampire, like parts of her physical being and her social being and her intellectual being, how like it almost feels like she only existed long enough to become a vampire. Is that like a good thing? I don't know. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about storytelling and story structure. I think Stephenie Meyer, you know, her writing isn't always the best in terms of like the actual sentences and like descriptions and like that. It's fine. You know, there's stuff to be desired. She's just not like the best writer in the world. But her ability to like craft a story and like, you know, weave a lot of different threads together is really good. And like, I gotta give her props for that. So I gave Eclipse 4 stars. And yeah, just one book left to go. Okay, so I finished Breaking Dawn, and guys, I love the Twilight series. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I'm like this. These books are just so good. Like, they're trash, right? Like, obviously, they're trash. They're not going to tell you that they're trash, but they're such good trash. Like, even though I do think that Stephenie Meyer's writing in this is actually, like, pretty weak, there were a lot of moments I was reading this where I was like, ooh, that was not a great sentence. Like, there's lots of moments that like really bumped me in terms of just like the flow of language. You can't deny that her world building is honestly like really good. Like, she sets rules and she follows them, and it's really interesting the way that she expands her universe in this book is just really great. You know, I think not too long ago she like came out with some statement that she has like 2 more books like set in the Twilight universe coming, and like that doesn't surprise me because there's so much you could write about in here, so many characters, so many things. I mean, just like basically as this book is like walking out the door to just like fucking drop, hey, by the way, there are like real werewolves, not the shit that you know, there's like actual werewolves. Like, that's wild. Like, what a fucking choice to make. Like, there's so many things like that in this book that I'm just like blown away by. I mean, there are things that are obviously never not going to be weird. Like Jacob imprinting on an infant, fucking weird. And it's not even weird that like he loves her, but like the expectation is like he's gonna fuck this baby someday. Like, she's not gonna be a baby anymore, but he will have helped raise this child, and then they're gonna bang. Like, that's gonna happen. And like I mean, there's only one truly unproblematic man in this universe, and that is of course Seth Clearwater, the love of my life, the sun in my sky. Like, I love him so much. I want an entire book that's just Seth Clearwater like complimenting people and like being joyous and nice. I love him so much. His and Edward's friendship is so great. The way that like Carlisle is basically like, you're my other son. I love you so much. You are also my son. I've chosen you and you're mine. I love that. Like I said in my little clip about Eclipse, Eclipse, Jesus Christ. Like I said in that clip, I am disappointed by the ending of this book. Just that, like, literally, you're assembling 2 armies. Give us a fucking battle. Like, give us something. Ooh, this is, like, all wonky. Give us something. Please. Come on. You can't put us in the middle of a field with 2 enormous armies that are very powerful and, like, somewhat evenly matched and, like, all this stuff, and then not give us action. The climax of this book is talking. There's nothing wrong with talking, right? Talking is fine. But not for the climax, not only of a book, but of your entire fucking series. It's just a series of conversations over like 4 chapters. You can't do that. We need something. I mean, sure, Irina dies or whatever, but like no one cares, right? I think the movie actually kind of did a really good job of getting around this, of like going through all of the motions of like filming the battle and choreographing it and CGIing everything, like having the battle happen, and then having it actually just being Alice showing Arrow what would happen if they decided to attack. That was a choice, and it was a great choice. Now I'm just thinking of Michael Sheen's weird-ass fucking laugh in the Breaking Dawn movie. That was a weird laugh. That's a weird man. I love Michael Sheen. I almost said Martin Sheen. I also love Martin Sheen. Anyway, I don't really know what I want to say about this. It's breaking dawn. It's fucking twilight. We are here. I had a very stressful day. This has been a very stressful week. It's my first week back at work. Things are not going as planned. My internet is hot garbo, which is making it hard to do my job. And this is the hardest time of year for me to do my job. So what I need right now is good internet. And I don't have good internet because of capitalism. So this has nothing to do with this book. This is just what I needed. Okay, this is what I needed. I needed garbage. And I'm very happy with my garbage. And you know what? This has made me really want to watch Bridgerton, right? Like, I already wanted to watch it, but like, the way that this garbage made me want to watch Bridgerton. I think Bridgerton is exactly the garbage that I need. This video took a journey. Anyway, whatever. Breaking Dawn, 4 stars. Is it a great book? No, but it's a good book because it does what it needs to do, and it just makes you feel things, and it makes you, most of all, feel like you're 12 years old again. And good God, if I could just be 12 years old right now, because I'm tired of being 25. Okay, so it is really late on a Wednesday night. I'm literally about to go to bed. This has been the busiest week of my life, and I've been trying to record this video for like 3 days. No, longer than that. And I have just not been able to breathe. It's been, like I said, really busy at work. This is like the busiest time of year for me. So I literally am squeezing this in right before I go to bed. Over the weekend, I finished If I Was Your Girl, Get in the Shop by Meredith Russo. This is a book that actually got recommended to me like a million times when I was in grad school. Whenever we were talking about like LGBTQ plus fiction or YA fiction, like this is a book that came up a lot. And so I rented it from my local library. That sounds weird, renting a book. I mean, that's what you're doing. It just feels weird. Like you rent a movie, but you check out a book. Language is funny. Anyway, I checked this out from my local library and I read it and I liked it. I didn't like it as much as I was hoping I would, but I still did like it. So basically the plot of this book is about this trans girl named Amanda who is moving in with her father who lives in a small town just outside Atlanta. They haven't really spoken in a while, but for reasons. She is moving from her mom's to her dad's and is attempting to live out her senior year or most of her senior year as stealth, which means that she is trying to pass for cis. So she's not, telling people that she is trans. And it's sort of just that story, the story of her senior year, of the people she meets, the friends she makes, the enemies she makes. And it's a good story. I found the character work to be pretty good. I think my biggest complaint about this book is that it was just too short. It wasn't even 300 pages. And I felt there was a lot more room to tell more story. I think it just sped through time very quickly, and I wanted there to be more room to breathe. So this takes place in a small Georgia town, right? And I live in the South. I live literally less than half an hour from the Georgia border. In a small town, big city, it's kind of complicated. But I know what sort of that southern small town life is like, at least adjacently. And I couldn't get a beat on this town. This town felt fake to me. I was not convinced this town was real. I was not really convinced that the people in the town were real. I believe that they were real to each other, but it just felt like it could have taken place anywhere. There was nothing inherently Georgia about it, or really even Southern about it, except for there is some heavy Baptist stuff in it. But if you take that out, this could have been kind of any small town that really hadn't dealt with trans issues before. You know what I mean? And maybe that's what Meredith Russo was going for. I have no idea. I don't know. I just felt like the town was supposed to be important. The fact that it was taking place where it was taking place was supposed to feel important, but it didn't. This book is Own Voices. Meredith Russo is trans. And you could feel that. The way to me that it really came across, I could feel that this was being written by a trans person, specifically a trans woman, was not actually from necessarily the things that Amanda was thinking and saying about herself, but more from the things that people were thinking and saying about her / to her. I really felt like the conversations in particular that Amanda was having with her parents, with the people in her life that she eventually comes out to, and then the people that she doesn't, those conversations felt super specific and real. And so those are the parts that I liked the most. When I said it was like a really like character heavy book, that's kind of what I meant. And sort of like the way that the characters related to each other, and specifically to Amanda, that was the part that felt real and like informed by something lived. And so I really loved those. As far as the plot goes, like I said, not a ton there, and I think there was room for more. It just felt a little rushed. I wanted more room to breathe. The climax of the plot was a bit predictable, a bit stereotypical, not necessarily sort of like, I don't want to give spoilers, but like there's sort of like a big thing that happens and then a smaller big thing that precedes it. The smaller big thing was definitely saw him coming a million miles away. That was a little frustrating. The big thing that happens, I mean, it was one of those things where I was like, I thought it could happen and I was really hoping it wouldn't. And then it did. And I'm like, okay, like it's not outside the realm of possibility that this thing would happen. I don't know. I thought this book was kind of going in a more wholesome direction. Not wholesome. I mean, I'm just going to say there's violence in here. There is anti-trans violence in here. And it was put off for so long that I had given myself hope that it wasn't going to happen. And then it did. And it felt it was both jarring and expected. And I really don't know how it managed to be both. I'm not saying I didn't like it. I mean, I didn't like it. I don't like trans violence. But I don't know. I don't know if it was necessarily earned by the story that was being told. I don't know if this is making sense. I'm very tired. The entire ending, the entire way it ended, both the climax and the denouement, I wasn't thrilled with. I still liked the book overall. I still had a good time reading it. I gave it 4 stars. This is a debut novel, and I could also tell that. And I don't know if Meredith Russo has written anything else. I am very excited to see what she does in the future. I think as far as debut novels go, this is very good. Like, this is very good for a debut novel. But something tells me that Meredith Russo has something even better in store, and I really hope I get to read it because this is a great start, but I know it could have been a little bit better, and so that's why it's only 4 stars. Right, the next book that I finished is Catch and Kill by Ronan Farrow. This is a book I wanted to read since it came out, but I wasn't gonna pay like $30 whatever for it. It's very expensive, and sorry, no. So I checked this out from my library. I actually finished this several days ago, but these past 2 weeks have been absolute hell. So I am just now getting to record this. This is such a stellar nonfiction story. I mean, it's nonfiction, but it reads like a thriller. It is incredibly good. So this is the story of how Ronan Farrow came to write the New Yorker piece that ended up exposing Harvey Weinstein for being the garbage piece of shit that he is. There's sort of like 3 main plots to the story. The first plot is Ronan and his editor or producer, McHugh, I don't remember his first name, his last name is McHugh, at NBC, because Farrow originally was working at NBC. They're sort of just like journalistic practice of like getting the information together, interviewing Harvey Weinstein's victims, and, you know, just doing the journalistic thing, right? The second plot line is Farrow and McHugh fighting tooth and nail with NBC to get them to run the story. And what was going on? Why wouldn't they do it? You know, all of the different players at NBC, like above them, like the various editors and producers and owners and things like that, all of them sort of like hitting this team from different angles and blaming each other and coming up with excuses for why the story couldn't be run and all of these things. Only it turns out that like all of them were being controlled by Harvey Weinstein. And then the third story is this plotline of Harvey Weinstein trying to shut Ronan Farrow up and hiring like literal Israeli spies or people trained by Israeli spies to follow him and harass him and spy on him and try and dig up dirt on him. And like all of these stories are woven together so wonderfully. Like it reads so well. It is very much a cohesive narrative. I was never really, the only time I ever got confused is there are a ton of people in here, right? There's a lot of names to keep straight, and sometimes Farrow doesn't necessarily like remind us of who people are, especially because most people are being referred to it by their last names. And I don't know, for me, I just have a hard time remembering last names and first names. So like he would mention someone and be like, I don't remember who this person is. I haven't heard their name in, 100 pages. So that was the only like thing that was kind of hard about it. But like everything else just like keeping up with the plot, keeping up with what he was trying to do in this moment, what pushback he was receiving, what's happening in the back, like keeping all of the track of everything that was going on. It was incredibly hectic. I felt so stressed out reading this. I can't imagine having lived through it. I was on the edge of my seat. I couldn't put it down. I was so busy at work and I was really pissed off about it because I just wanted to keep reading this book. It was just incredible. It was incredible. I had so much fun reading this. Another thing that I really liked about it is because I think he waited so long to publish this book, the last like good part of this book actually has kind of nothing to do with Weinstein anymore and is more about all of the fallout of his story and what happened and how pursuing this one guy and like who was incredibly powerful and like could control these people, how like this one area of pursuit just like opened this floodgate of other stories. Like Ronan Farrow will have stories to be reporting on just from pursuing Weinstein until he's dead. Like there's just so many new things. I mean, he goes into Matt Lauer and someone else whose name is totally escaping me. He goes into NBC and like the levels of corruption up at NBC that he used to work for. And it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And this is a memoir, right? This is Ronan Farrow telling the story of his own process of telling a story. And I really enjoyed how introspective he was. Even though this is technically a story about him, he absolutely still prioritized the experiences and the voices of the women who were victimized, but it is about him. So he makes some room for, you know, his own thoughts and like progression of thoughts on these topics. Like, for example, he talks quite a bit about his relationship with his sister Dylan, who was sexually assaulted by their father, Woody Allen, and how, you know, it seemed to be easier for him to offer like grace and empathy and compassion to women who were like strangers to him than it was to his own sister. And like, he, you know, their relationship is not at all like a focus of this book, but it's sort of like this like thread in the background that was nice. And like he talks about his relationship with John Lovett, whom I love dearly, and you know how he was so dogged in his pursuit of the story that like he, you know, kind of nearly fucked up his relationship with his now fiance, right? Which, by the way, not to like spoil things, but like he does propose to John Lovett like in the book. John talked about the story on one of his podcasts, and I don't want to get married, but should I ever be swayed someday, that is the only proposal that I will accept, is through the form of a book. But yeah, this was just incredibly thoughtful, truly stunning writing. Like, I had to keep reminding myself that this was real and not fiction, because he told these like true factual events in a way that felt so compelling and so like visceral. Like I knew that he was there. Like these things were absolutely real. They were almost too real. Like he wrote them so well that it felt like he was crafting a narrative. I mean, he was crafting a narrative, but like a fictional narrative. This is definitely the best nonfiction book that I read in a very long time. I'm glad I finally read it. I gave it 5 stars and I highly recommend it. Okay, good morning. It is very early in the morning because I have to go into my office today. But I just finished reading Brown by Kevin Young. This is a collection of poems. I first heard about Kevin Young because he is now the host of the New Yorker Poetry Podcast, and I really like him as that host. I think he does a very good job. So I picked up one of his books of poetry. I think this is the only one that my library system had. I could be wrong about that, but that's what I remember. I am not very good at like reviewing poetry. I'm good at sort of like close reading, but just like sort of talking about why I did or did not like a poem. I'm not good at that at all. I ended up giving this collection 3 stars, not because I thought it was only like okay or anything like that, but because so many of these poems are filled with cultural references that come from a time period prior to my knowledge, right? There's lots of sports references from like a generation or two ago, and music references from a generation or two ago. And to me, like understanding those references was very foundational to understanding a large portion of this book, which is fine. Like there's nothing wrong with that, but it made a lot of this inaccessible to me. I mean, there were other things that were like very accessible. My favorite poem / like series of poems in this book was a triptych for Trayvon Martin, which is a series of 3 poems. And each of the poems is also dedicated to a different victim, Black victim of police violence, Sandra Bland, Tamir Rice, and Michael Brown. And there were lots of poems that more dealt with like sort of like general Southern life in particularly like Black Southern life. Those I found very accessible and I liked those a lot. But in the beginning, especially, this book was filled with lots of like baseball and basketball poems, and parts of them like I was able to like sort of see through the sports to get to the heart of the poem, and then there were some that I just couldn't, and it made it very hard for me to get into this book. I found that the second half, it was much easier for me to like sort of get into it and like really understand what he was trying to say. But by that point, I had already not like checked out, but like I was already like sort of feeling a little distance from this book. That being said, any time that he really delved into the way that like racism and microaggressions and white supremacy has like touched his life personally, those poems were extremely specific and beautiful and poignant. I really enjoyed his preference, I guess, for tercets. I love tercets. I find them a very, very useful way to organize a poem. In fact, just in general, I really liked his poem organization. A very funny thing about this book is that when you first open it up, or at least when I first opened it up, I saw this on the inside front end paper, and I assumed, because this is a library book, that like somebody had checked this out and like their kid had gotten a hold of it, and I was like, oh my god, that's so funny, it's so cute, and like that's how I was operating. And I was actually thinking about like, I don't know, tweeting about it or something, like, oh, look at what happened in this library book, except it's also on the back end paper. And that's when I looked, and it's actually Kevin Young's son drew those. So I'm very glad I didn't tweet anything, because it would have looked extremely stupid. So ultimately the issue, or I guess my issue with this book, is just that like it felt like it was written for an older generation, like maybe not even quite my parents' generation, but like the generation between my parents and I. Like it felt like it was sort of written for that time period, and I just didn't understand it. Yeah, I gave it 3 stars. I do recommend it. I would recommend first that you have a thorough understanding of like 70s baseball and music. I guess that is my parents' generation. Yeah, I recommend you be my parents' generation. Hey there, so I have just finished recording a read with me for Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, the most cursed addition to the Harry Potter franchise. That read with me should absolutely be up by now. I'm hoping beyond hope. So I will link that up in the corner so you can hear all of my thoughts as I went through reading this for the first time since it came out in 2016. I had quite a lot to say. I will just say for now that I gave it 1 star. So if you want to know more, go ahead and watch that. I'm not going to get into it more here, but yeah, this was a process, and the process is now over. Thank God. Hello, it is morning. It has been the morning from hell. My dishwasher flooded twice, and then my mop broke. So I'm just gonna talk about this book. This is the last book that I read in January, and it was very good. Before I start, I do want to offer a content warning. I am not going to be, discussing anything in detail, but this book that I'm about to talk about does have extremely explicit descriptions of childhood sexual assault and violence. When I say explicit, I don't mean gratuitous. It is extremely factual and like by the book, like just here is what happened. So I'm not going to be talking about those things, but I just want to make you aware that that is something that happens. The book in question is The Fact of a Body by Alexandria Marzano-Lesnevich. This is a very unique book. I don't think I've ever read anything like it. It is simultaneously the story of the murder of a 6-year-old boy in very rural Louisiana, and the story of Marzano-Lesnevich's life, and how these two stories, seemingly very unconnected, are very thematically intertwined. It took me quite a while, not quite a while, probably like 50 to 75 pages to sort of figure out what this story was. And at first I wasn't really on board, and I think it was because I came into this not really understanding what this was going to be. I assumed this was going to be sort of a true crime story, and along the true crime story was the author's sort of memoir telling of like how they got involved and like what her sort of relationship to the crime was, as either like a lawyer or an investigator or something along those lines. And instead, without giving, I guess I can say this because it's in the front flap of the book, basically what happens is when she is in law school, Marzano-lesnevich gets an internship. She goes into this internship being like very staunchly and firmly and clearly anti-death penalty. And then she is confronted by Ricky Langley, a man who murdered and potentially molested a 6-year-old boy. And this sort of not confrontation, because she doesn't actually meet him that summer, but this sort of understanding or introduction to this case absolutely shatters her world and shatters her relationship to herself and her ideology and her own past. I don't really know how to talk about this without A, spoiling things, and then B, getting a little too explicit for this review. But she sees echoes and patterns in the story of this particular crime in her own life, and goes on this journey that she like wasn't expecting. And it's just some of the most stellar, intelligent, beautiful, gut-wrenching, introspective work that I've ever read. You know, this is ultimately a story about Marzano-lesnevich. It's about her life. It's about her relationship to her family, to her childhood, to her body, to sex, and how, like, sort of this obsession that she develops with this child's murder leads her to really picking apart all of the things she thought she knew. Once I kind of got a good beat on the story, once I really like understood what it was about, I both couldn't pick it up and couldn't put it down. It was very, very, very difficult to read. And like I said at the beginning, this is an extremely triggering book. If you are triggered by descriptions of violence, particularly sexual violence, and particularly sexual violence toward a minor, I would be very careful reading this if those things are triggering for you. There's also sort of less graphic, but like if you are triggered by eating disorders, by not very healthy family dynamics, that is also something you would want to take into consideration. Like I said before, any descriptions in this book are not gratuitous. They are not there for shock value. The writing style in this, even at times when it is very poetic, very beautiful prose, the descriptions are always there to serve a purpose. It's you need to know what happened. You need to see what happened to me. You need to see what happened to this little boy. You need to know the facts. And they are facts, right? They're not, like I said, they're not there for shock value. They're there to tell the truth. That being said, I could very, very easily see them being triggering for people. So just approach this book with caution. That being said, I still highly recommend this. It is some of the best nonfiction writing I've ever read. Oh, I can't remember. Okay, I got this recommendation from somewhere. I want to say, because it is nonfiction, I want to say I got this from Brittany over at Literally Smitten because she's the nonfiction queen, but I'm not 100% certain. So if it was somebody else, I'm sorry. But if it was Brittany, thank you. This is just an absolute bombshell of a book. I would start reading this being like in a super good mood, and then I'd read like 5 chapters and I'm like, I'm not happy. I'm not having a good time, except that this is a great book. I don't really know what else to say. Beautiful writing, haunting ass story, and very important. I think it's just important. So I gave this 5 stars and I really highly recommend it. Okay, and to wrap this up, I'm just going to talk very briefly about the Marvel comics that I read this month. I was very good about following the sort of reading schedule that I laid out for myself, because yes, I have a reading schedule for my comics. Please do not come for me, thank you. I read 8 Marvel comic book collections over the course of this month. I read Deadpool Classic Volume 7, which I gave 4 stars, Deadpool Classic Volume 8, which I also gave 4 stars, Daredevil Yellow, 5 stars. Yes, I am a slut for Daredevil, please don't look at me. Elektra the Scorpio Key, 3 stars, Elektra Volume 1 Introspect, 4 stars, Elektra Volume 2 Everything Old is New Again, also 4 stars, Avengers Assemble Volume 1, 3 stars, and Avengers Forever, 4 stars. So, like I said at the beginning, that brings me to 17 for the month. That is all I have for you in the month of January. I have some kind of exciting plans for February. The videos I've never really made before, new things I want to try out. as well as just like all of the books that I am going to read for February. Do I have a plan? No. Do I ever? No. Okay, nerds, that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Okay, bye.